My name is Ryder.
My name is nevaeh, and we have a special guest. Their name is
Anna.
Today we'll be discussing things about GMCC and what they do and ways we can help.
And we'll be asking Anna questions, and she will be answering for us.
So our first question is, how have you helped immigrants throughout your life?
So I've been involved with like volunteering at a refugee center before I went to college. That's in the U.S. That was in Des Moines, Iowa. I've also done a lot of like English language tutoring during college. And then I was a bilingual outreach worker at a school, like an elementary school, for a year. And then I also currently I'm working in a school teaching English to speakers of other languages now. And that's a really fun job. And I would say, I think a really important thing is having a strong and disciplined approach to language learning, which is important for connecting with people from all over the world. Studying and keeping up with how the U.S. government treats the question of immigration is also important. I think some of the ruling class people in charge of everything, they flip-flop and have different ideas about immigration. So, for example, they claim not to be able to afford more people coming here. But if that were true, then why do they spend so much money on military budget? And then they later use that money to like fund different wars in other countries. I think United States here, we have like a large population of just working people, and we have nothing to gain from all the wars that are caused by all that money basically going to like kill innocent people in other countries. So that's how I would say I think it's important to understand what an immigrant is, also the different types of reasons why people come here. So some people are forced here because they're in their countries are war torn, so they have to be somewhere safe. Well, where are they going to go if they've been like ousted out of their like hometown and stuff? So that's what we would call refugees. I just think it's important to make that distinction. If we really want to help immigrants, it's like, okay, well, the ones that need the most help it's because they're refugees usually.
What is your idea of helping people?
Okay, so the basic things you need to like live in America are a house. I mean, you kind of need, whether that's an apartment, but it should be affordable. So how are you going to afford it? You need to be able to have a good job. So finding a good job that's not like you're not like working.
What is your ideas for helping people?
Okay, so to help people, I think, isn't it a good idea to make sure people have what they need to live a satisfying life, not just surviving? Because obviously you can survive like with very little, but it's not enjoyable. You should be able to have enough food. Food's not super expensive. You should be able to have a place to live and not have to be working more than 40 hours. I think is a lot of hours to work during the work week or like during the week. But yeah, so, and I would say also like immigrants, a lot of immigrants, especially refugees coming here, they're working more than 40 hours a week. And so I think it would be good if we could figure out how to organize in such a way to make sure people aren't having to be overworked like that. Underpaid and overworked is a huge part of being able to help other people. Food is really expensive. Does it really have to be that expensive? So looking at like economic things, I think is really a key part of being able to help people. So understanding how the world works and why is it that we can't provide for people, even though we are such a rich and developed country. Where is all that wealth like being pocketed? You know what I mean? So those are the type of questions I'm asking before I'm even able to like consider a solution for helping.
Another question we have is, what are your experiences with immigrants?
My experiences with immigrants have always been very positive. Most of my experience has been at all my past jobs, and also meeting like friends at whether it was a refugee center studying together at university, and that's also a good way to make really like lifelong friendships. So in that sense, like yeah, positive, I would say.
How can you help? How can we help immigrants who are in need?
Yeah, I mean, number one, I think is getting to know them. Like I said earlier, about how immigrants are a large part of our population. Some of them are documented, some of them are not documented. But that's what you'll find out if you get to know them on a friendship level, sort of thing. So um, they will let you know what their needs are if they have any. You know what I mean? And then I would say, based on pretty harsh laws against immigration in general that trickle down to us from the top administrators of the U.S. capitalist class, whether that's Obama presidency or a Trump presidency, lots of immigrants are struggling with getting the proper papers and documentations to even be here legally. It is very hard to get to the United States. So others, some based on what country you're from, it might be easier getting entry into this country, but other countries have been like it's really hard to get a visa or to be a student here. So that's not something that makes me like sad because like I meet people from like in other countries when I go travel, and of course they would love to come visit the U.S., but they can't. It's just like a huge process. And an example of like getting around like the huge bureaucracy that shuts people out is to just one solution is get married to an American. But then that leads to problems with like then if it's a woman marrying an American man, then and if that relationship goes sour, then what's she gonna do to get out of a bad relationship, stuff like that. And then she's away from her home country and in a foreign country that's very like dominating of workers' lives and stuff like that. So that's just an example of some of the problems with like how we push people into these weird situations. Like, oh well, just get married. Like that's not that we. What if you don't want to get married? You basically can't travel and stuff like that. So, do you have any questions about that?
Um, if I not currently, um, I'll think about it, and if I think of something, I'll say it at the end. Another question we have is how can people help GMCC with their struggles?
Um, yeah, I think if GMCC learns exactly what the problems that refugees are facing around the world, they might take more of a radical approach. I know I saw on their website that I think it was a bishop or some type of clergy said we should go upstream and figure out what the cause of all these problems is. So that's something I read on their website, and I think we've pretty much figured that out. We've figured out we have gone upstream and we have figured out what's causing all the hardships in this country. So I think you have to consider the fact that $820 billion is spent on the military instead of things that we need like healthcare, good paying jobs, uh, for everyone, not just like for people who I don't know, like were born here, for example. Like you deserve a good job, but you don't. That doesn't make any sense. Everyone needs a good job, and then infrastructure is stuff like hospitals, railways, and like transportation and stuff. That also needs to be something that we should be putting money into instead of like military for wars. And the connection between cost of living crisis here at home and the refugee crisis in other countries is very connected. They're almost it's not the same problem, but it's the same salute. Like in a sense, the causes are very similar. The same people doing the damage are doing it in other countries too. So yeah, even undocumented immigrants, these are the ones who that Trump says is like like scary and bad and criminals and stuff like that just because they're undocumented. But yeah, they pay like $100 billion in taxes. So it's not like the undocumented immigrants are not, like, it's just such a lie that Trump would say that they're bad, scary people. They're paying taxes just like everyone else. And they have a more difficult life because like they are under threat of being deported, like by especially people like ICE and like other police and stuff like that. So deporting people, even that costs money, which is which is like so interesting to like analyze and think about. So I think GMCC is probably doing what they can under the circumstances of, because basically they just need money. But we also need to radically transform the way that the society is run so that it's not, like, so like we have to say basically, please can we have some money to like have a good home, or please can we have some money for like working 40 hours? It's ridiculous.
What you were saying about that the government is spending $820 billion on military and like spending it on stuff to prevent immigrants, or like instead of they're just spending it on stuff to push them away instead of like helping them with like homes, food, and they're just pushing immigrants away because they're like, oh, well, we don't want you here because you're different from us.
And just like people like think like, oh, immigrants can't be here because they're bad people and they can't do this or they can't do that or they can't do a good job because what they can or cannot do. And it's like they can do this, they can do that, and they can learn languages, and they can't be here because they can't learn languages or anything like that. They could be here because they could want to be here, or they want to visit, or like just like have a great life and like oh my god,
Yeah.
Restart fresh.
And I think also people are scared of change because they don't want to have new things. Like some it's certain things, but when it's like new people coming, they're like, I don't I feel off about you or something because of how they look and how they're just arriving in like large numbers. So I think that's a part of the problem as well.
Yeah, can I say one more thing?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because it's like you mentioned what the government does as far as like allocating budgets to all of this, but not actually helping anyone. I would just add that they're also not helping like non-immigrants. So you have the population is very large of what do we have, like 300 million people in the U.S. A large sector of those people are not immigrants, first generation, because you also have generations. They've been here several generations, so they're not immigrants anymore. Then you have also immigrants that have arrived here. So those two sectors are being treated very much. I mean, like you probably know somebody who has to work paycheck to paycheck. Okay, that's also not helping people live better. So the same struggles that immigrants have oftentimes are the same as like non-immigrants. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because I've noticed, well, like the last winter and like this summer, the city of Minneapolis has been putting up fences around like under bridges and like on the sides, because that's where homeless people would stay, so they'd have shelter in case there was like a rain or something. So then if they have tents, or if they even don't, then they can be under some sort of shelter. And the city of Minneapolis is just putting up barriers instead, because to put up things to prevent people from getting in costs money, instead of spending it on more like homeless shelters or like apartment complexes for the homeless. they are just spending it on fences and other stuff to prevent them from sleeping and having shelter.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned the city budget because that's another like question, and you can see with your own eyes what they're spending it on, just like a barrier. I would also add that there's empty apartments that they're just sitting there empty because the person who owns it, whether that's a bank or an investor, is sitting around waiting for somebody who's rich that can pay them what they want out of it. So that's the other thing I think we could easily end homelessness by simply putting homeless people in these empty apartments and houses. So that's one idea too.
And also to add of what he said of what people like come here is also people think that they come here and they buy like weird things or like things that people would not need, but like in their culture they would need it or they could want it because it's their culture. And when people come here and when people see immigrants and people think, oh, they can't buy that because of what reason? But no, because they would buy it or they want it or because of their culture.
I mean, like things like TV or phone and stuff like that.
Kinda, but not really. But like,
So I've seen that happen with phones. It's like they try to shame you for like spending money on phones. It's like, you kind of need a phone nowadays.
yeah.
Yeah.
People think that immigrants buy just things that we don't need.
Like what?
Like an example, like speakers or
For music.
I don't know how to explain it, but it's like people buy things that they want, like how immigrants would want. Or people think that immigrants buy stuff when they get the money and they buy stupid things. But no. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the like, okay, so I think everyone deserves to buy things and to have things that they want and that they need. Like, and who are we to be like, you shouldn't want that? That would be weird. It doesn't matter if you're an immigrant or not immigrant. I think that happens a lot. But I see what you mean. Yeah, judging people basically.
Another question we have is, what are major bills immigrants have to pay?
Yeah, I mean, immigrants pay bills just like anyone else. There's, for some reason, an idea that like they don't pay their fair share or whatever. And I would argue that the billionaires are the ones who don't pay their fair share of like actually contributing to society. Some cities in the U.S. Have programs that provide like some housing programs. So I know some of my friends in Des Moines, when they arrived because they're refugees, they got like 6 months. Some cities are better than maybe you get 3 years to you have your apartment provided by the government, and then that's your time to figure out how you're going to get a job, how you're going to be able to pay for this stuff later and stuff like that. 6 months is not a lot to think about it. Learn English, get a good job, and it's already hard to get a job anyway if you do speak English. So there's a lot of things like that. But even with certain housing programs, the little help that refugees can get, I think it's, like struggling workers that are not immigrants, they see that and they think, well, that's not fair. Why did they get a house and I'm struggling to get a house? So then this whole another like wave of like xenophobia can happen, and racism. Do you know what xenophobia is?
No.
It's like the fear of people from a different country.
Oh yeah.
So so like immigrants are all scary, bad people. It, it would be a big xenophobic argument. But my experience, yeah, and like, well, so another example is that volunteering at a refugee centers are depending on people to come and basically work for free. That's not very sustainable if you can't pay people for work that they do. So they're not going to have volunteers for very long. It's probably a high turnover type of thing unless you just really just like have nothing to do. You don't actually, maybe you already have a really good job and you don't have to work a lot of hours, so then you can just volunteer. But yeah, so you have to pay people for their work, and it is expensive living under capitalism. So I think a complete overhaul of the economy is needed so that we can take power out of the hands of the super rich controlling it and putting it into the hands of workers who actually make society run.
Yeah, like instead of like really rich people spending it on like $1 billion, $1 billion mansions and like super fancy cars and all this other stuff, they can spend money on helping like homeless people, immigrants, people who are less fortunate than the rich people, and just help them so they can live a better life.
Yeah, and I would argue they probably won't, because then that's us telling them, that's us begging of the rich people, please do this with your money. They don't care what we want to them to do with their money. We have to take it from them, and we have to run the society because like where do they get that money? It's from our work. So we while we like workers produce all this like value and like we get all this stuff done. I know, and a lot of people say no light bulb shines, no wheel turns, no horn honks, no telephone rings without the permission of the working class. So none of this stuff would actually function without workers. But billionaires are just reaping all of that benefit, and so that's kind of like a parasitical relationship that they have with us.
We have, I think, two more questions. The first one is, what are your experiences living in other places?
Oh, well, I first left the US for a foreign exchange trip in Spain when I was 16. That helped me to learn Spanish, and I was really sad, and I
Do
cried.
they have good chocolate?
Spain? I don't know. Yeah. They have, I mean, dark chocolate, I guess. I think that's the first time I had dark chocolate. And so I was like sad to come back to the US, and that was in 2003. And then 10 years later, I left for Korea after getting my degree in English as a second language. And this time I was able to live in Korea with an actual stable job. So that was a big difference. And I was able to stay for 3 years. I really loved learning Korean. I got to teach in schools, colleges, universities. Yeah. And then I came home for a few months before applying for another job in the Galapagos Islands, which are in Ecuador. And I lived there for 6 months because their work visa is like harder to get. It's really complicated. But it was a really beautiful place, and I could swim. And there's like sharks and all the turtles and stuff that you can just swim whenever you want. And it was super fun. And then when I was there, I applied for my next job, which was an English language fellow, and that's a program put on by the U.S. Department of State. And they accepted my application and placed me in Argentina. So that's why I lived for for another job. Yeah, I didn't like the way that they wanted me to be like a language soldier for the United States. So I had to basically act like the United States is so great and everyone should move here or something. So I would never choose to like work so directly with the U.S. government again.
What was your favorite place that you visited to learn a different language or something?
Korea.
Korea. I heard it's a really beautiful place.
Well, their language is so cool. It's super fun to learn Korean. The alphabet is like super cute and like put together and very organized.
I have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
So, what was living in different places made you think about immigrants?
I mean, it's not like I was thinking about immigrants. Okay, so when you live in other places, getting to know people is like the most important thing that's happening. And like immigration changes constantly from year to year. So when you live in another place, it doesn't necessarily teach you like how the new immigration laws or how the US is now blocking this group of people or deporting this other group of people. I won't know that because I'm just chilling in Korea. You know what I mean? I'm just getting to know the Korean culture. But one thing for sure is that over the years in my own lifetime, the US has engaged in more and more like atrocities overseas. I mean, we've seen the Ukraine war that's been in the last, 5 years? And then Palestine has been going on. That's probably the biggest issue we can look at. And the genocide there does not have to be happening in the first place. So when you analyze like the refugee crisis all over the world, then it's easier to see that it's actually the U.S. that has its hand like economically in a lot of other countries. For example, the U.S. is the only country with military bases in like all these other countries. When I was in Korea, I literally would hang out at a bar where all the U.S. soldiers were because there was a base in my city. So they're literally occupying a lot of different countries, especially the Latin America. They spend probably $18 billion on military aid to Israel, which is then used to turn Gaza into rubble. And then obviously that sets off a crisis of refugees, of people who have nowhere safe to go, and they're not granted a safe place to go. So people are dying not just from shelling, but also from starvation and diseases because their hospitals, their schools, their stores, all their infrastructure is now just gone. So how are they going to get the care they need? They can't use their cell phones either. And so actually 90% of people are without anywhere to go besides a refugee camp. And then we have United Nations not even really placing them, even though they say they are so humanitarian. They're not doing that good work that they say they're doing. So yeah, when I live in other places, getting to know people, yeah, that's important. In Ecuador, I met a lot of people from Colombia and Venezuela. Like I said earlier, they would have loved to come to the U.S. There's no way that they were in a position to apply or get accepted for a visa to come here. So it's really easy for Americans to travel. You just get your passport. You can go almost anywhere in the world. And this is a huge privilege that U.S. workers and students should not feel bad about. And instead, you should just use it to travel and learn as much as possible. And I think experience with traveling helps you gain the knowledge you need so that you can transform the world into a better place, a place without unnecessary borders. And, you can like organize the working class so that the U.S. capitalists don't keep dumping money into military destruction all over the world and creating so much displaced persons. Like entire families are basically have nowhere to go and stuff. So I don't think we have any interest in the destruction of workers and students' lives and communities in other countries. And so I think in America, we have a really unique opportunity and task at hand, which is to overthrow the billionaire class who profit from all this death and destruction. We don't profit from death and destruction of our class brothers and sisters overseas. So what do you think about that?
Interesting. Do you have any questions for us?
I think it's really cool that you're talking about immigration and refugee crises. Yeah. And if the more you can like study that, I think you'll like come to some like good solutions and like good ideas for how to like fix it. Cause it's definitely a big issue. It's not just like, it also raises the question of like, why does racism still exist and stuff like that? Why is Trump whipping up the culture war over and over again, just like all the presidents before him? It doesn't even matter if a Democrat or a Republican is in power; they still deport people. I think Obama deported even more immigrants than Trump did in his first term. So, but basically, I'm saying like they represent the rich, Democrats and Republicans. We don't even have like a politician or a party that represents workers. We don't want that. We don't want to deport people. Oh, yeah. So I think it's really cool that you're studying this. And what made you decide to ask about immigration?
Um, I guess, I mean, I don't really pay attention to the news, but when I do, a lot of it's about like immigrants are being taken from their homes because of war, and that's the main problem, or like other things. The US is known as like a free country to go to, like really nice and whatever. So I feel like that's another reason is because they want to come here so they can, because I guess it feels more welcoming than other places and to get away from war.
Like trying to get away from everything that they have or what's going on in their country or in their city. And they just want to come here because of they just want to get away from everything, or they're just stressed out of work or kids or like family issues. They just want to get away from everything, so they come here to visit or live here and to like I don't know, just try to get away from everything.
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority are still stuck in refugee camps.
Mm-hmm.
We only see about 10, like less than 10% of all displaced people whose homes have been destroyed. And by who? People that the US government funded to then drop those. So it's like really, it's a whole circle. So I know a lot of people who did not want to be here. They didn't want to be here. But they had to go somewhere. And it's all so they put in the application, and then different countries accept them. And different countries have caps of like how many refugees they can take on and stuff like that. So then it's like, okay, it's like this. It's like, okay, now you've been set to like go to the US. Or okay, now you get to go to Britain. I know a friend of mine, we were just talking about this because her family were told that they had to go to Britain or they could go to Britain, but then they changed it and they said, okay, no, you're going to the US. And they were like really sad because they had to go to the US instead of Britain. But that's just an example. It's like they don't really have a choice in the matter, especially depending on like the situation. Then there's of course other types of immigration where it's like, oh, immigrating to the US to become a doctor, like stuff like that. It's not as like difficult. But the refugee crisis is a huge issue. I think we should keep talking about it and keep studying it.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for talking about us, not about us, but thank you for talking with us about this.
Yes, it was fun.